Welcome to GlassTalk, Canada's podcast for the architectural glass industry. Now here's your host, Patrick Flannery.
Hey everybody, it's Pat Flannery coming at you again with yet another podcast and video for you guys out there. I got a release came through a little while ago from our good friends at the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, the mighty CFIB, talking about new announcements on interprovincial trucking. Many of us, as we know, are shipping product across borders for one reason or another. So I thought this was a chance to maybe touch on an issue we don't talk about every day. It's not the old, glazing and window and door standards and glass building envelope stuff. We're into another aspect of our business that. Nevertheless, I think is pretty important. So joining me is Duncan Robertson. He is the Senior Policy Analyst for Nova Scotia for the CFIB. Duncan, how you doing?
Great. Thanks for having me, Patrick. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's great to have you with us. You're joining from beautiful Halifax, Nova Scotia. We are Canadian, so my first question has to be, how's the weather out there today?
It's good. It's good. Not rainy, not cold, so it still feels like summer. So hoping that sticks around for a little while. But
Yes.
the inevitable winter's coming.
Yep, we have an extended summer here in Ontario as well. It seems like it just got a little bit cold yesterday, and but I went ahead and closed the pool. But anyways, we'll see. I might even be premature on that, even though it's October. Duncan, why don't you start out by giving us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing at the CFIB?
Also, like you stated, I'm a senior policy analyst at the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. We represent, over 97,000 small businesses across Canada, which makes us the largest nonprofit organization devoted solely to the needs of small businesses. We cover, a number of different aspects of areas that impact small businesses, particularly like internal trade. In fact, I'm a co-author on our internal trade report card, which is a report that comes out every year since 2022, grading provinces and other jurisdictions on their work or lack thereof of reducing barriers to internal trade. So that's, between provinces in Canada. So that's, significant. And, when we think about too, we might think, why is a small business organization, focused on this issue? Well, we talk to our members every month through surveys, and we found that close to 9 in 10 say that they believe it's a priority to make it easier to do work between provinces, which I'm sure you have listeners and viewers who are definitely feeling some of that issue as well. But also, half say that it impacts their productivity. We hear, of course, we're going through a productivity crisis right now. So making sure that we're making it as easy as possible to do work between provinces is something that I'm focused on at CFIB and as well as the entire organization.
It's a huge issue for our industry, Duncan. There's absolutely no question about it. A lot of the problems that we face are somewhat esoteric ones, usually related to how building codes differ between provinces and how standards and energy efficiency requirements might differ across provinces. But there are still a lot of the larger issues as well. For moving product, manufacturing in one province, selling in another, getting it from place to place, and I guess that's what we're going to focus on here today, because we're talking all the time about the differences in the building codes and the standards. It's just an ongoing grind for the industry. There's a lot of efforts to harmonize things, and those are ongoing. In fact, it's hopeful. There seems to be some how would I put it, some desire at the top to make this happen now that maybe wasn't always there in the past. The premiers seem a little less interested in fighting with one another over jurisdiction and precedents. But anyways, that's all on the specific industry side. We're going to talk a little more today. We're going to talk about shipping and trucking. I guess to start out with, I guess at the highest level, it always surprises us, I think, as Canadians, to discover that there are barriers to interprovincial trade and trucking and movement of product. Maybe not everyone's the same, but I certainly always, feel like, well, this is, one country and all this stuff just sort of happens. Give me I guess the historical perspective on this, Duncan. What have been the barriers that CFIB looks at when it comes to moving product across provinces?
Perfect. So yeah, so when we look at historically, you rightfully pointed out that we're one country and small businesses, and everyone would expect to be able to move goods, services, people freely between these provinces. But what we see now is when you look at places like the EU, it's easier for EU members to trade between themselves than it is provinces. We've also heard from some businesses that frankly, it's easier to trade with American states than it is with other provinces. So that's, again, really, really concerning when you think of, again, Canada as one country. But there are, again, like you said, the main pain points that some small businesses have faced, things like regulation on workers' compensation. So if you're covered in one province, it's difficult to be covered again in another province. So having to do the administrative work, costs as well. I was talking to one small business a few days ago. They do transformer maintenance across Canada, and their rates have skyrocketed because they have to register in other provinces and things like that. So bring it down to the most basic level. If you have a car that's insured in, let's say, where I am in Nova Scotia, you'd expect to be able to drive that across the country with no problem. That's a fact with cars. But when you think about doing work, it's a whole nother story, which is definitely a concern. Also, some things like trading alcohol products. I was recently out west. I was on Salt Spring Island, beautiful place, had a great cider. But I can't really access that cider because they don't sell it at the NSLC, and they don't allow for direct selling to consumers, which is a huge issue. Someone might think, that's across Canada, that makes sense. But in the same vein, again, there's a brewer in Charlottetown, 2.5 hours from where I'm at. I can't get that brewery unless I drive 2.5 hours to that brewery, which is ridiculous. And there are some economic impacts as well for small businesses trying to sell their products, of course. But then, like you said, transportation, that's been an issue that we're seeing some progress on. I'm sure we'll talk about that in a few minutes, but something that we want to really see addressed too. As well, food products. Let's say you're a small butcher in Gatineau, Quebec, cut off a couple steaks, get some ground beef, want to go across the Champlain Bridge and sell that at Ottawa farmers market. That's illegal unless you go through the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, go through a processor that's registered with them, or become registered yourself, which is a whole fight in and of its own. You need a certain number of parking spots, certain kind of lighting, so many little changes that just make small businesses say, hey, I don't want to do it. So there are several different aspects that impact internal trade. And when you think about a small business owner, we find that they work around 54 hours a week, just keeping their business open, just keeping their business afloat, things like labor shortages, et cetera. So even though there might be some small levels of friction between trading between provinces, you add all that up, and it just, for many small businesses, they put their hands up and they say, hey, it's too difficult. I'm just going to stay in my province and do work there, which again impacts our productivity as a whole as a nation.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just a kind of thing is that there's not enough hours in a day. You don't have the resources. You don't have the person sitting there to do the paperwork, and it causes an issue. So what were some of the? Can you go a little more in depth on the barriers to trucking, like moving product from province to province? What kind of things have we faced? I guess maybe go pre-CFTA. What was the landscape like out there?
Yeah, so prior to the CFTA, or I guess the changes that are coming from the CFTA, there's a number of issues with trucking. Again, one country, you'd expect to be able to move between provinces easily, but things like, which is an odd kind of thing I'll point out here, but there's a different definition in what sunrise and sunset is between provinces, particularly in the Western countries or Western provinces. So if you're an oversized vehicle, you can't move between sunset and sunrise. So even though in your province you might be totally fine in the morning, depending on what hour you're at crossing that border, it could be illegal, the work that you're doing, which again is incredibly odd. But then there's things like something like just the national standard for bridge heights. There's no national standard. So when you're trying to do work between provinces, sometimes it changes your permitting and on where you can go, the routes you can take. You might be fine in bridges for, let's say, BC, for instance, but you get across the border to Alberta, it's a whole different kettle of fish. So again, that's definitely a concern. Differences in road bans during the spring, and there's differences in between provinces, but also in between provincial or municipal jurisdictions as well. So going from city to city, you might not be able to travel on a certain road because it's the spring and it's soft, and you might be oversized. All of these things are all regulations that aren't uniform between provinces and, like I said, municipalities in some cases. So when you think of our network of supply chains, we saw during the pandemic as well as over the past couple of months, it's incredibly fragile. So we really want to see some ways to strengthen that. And we've seen some changes being proposed by provinces to kind of harmonize some of these regulations. And we think it's a way that we can strengthen our supply chain and really help a lot of small businesses who are, looking for, their supply chains to be improved, not waiting, weeks, months, et cetera, for products. You might just need one little piece to finish your job, but it's going to take you weeks or months to get it, which again impacts a lot of people being able to get paid for their work. So it's a significant issue, and we think that it's something that should be addressed for sure.
The Now your driver certifications and your driver licenses are going to be like that'll be recognized pretty much everywhere, right? Are there differences in things like your load, how your loading is done, and like the weight class of, well, I mean, you mentioned the weight class of the trucks on the roads. I'm wondering also about loading and securing loads and things like that. Are there differences there, or is that pretty commonly held?
No, we've seen from organizations like the Canadian Trucking Agency that look, there's not really a harmonized system for defining oversized, overweight for the permitting process, which is again very concerning when you're trying to move loads between provinces and how much that makes up of our supply chain in general. So it's something that we as an organization have highlighted. The CTA has highlighted some professors and economists as well. People like Trevor Toom have raised the concerns about the unharmonized reality facing the trucking sector. It sounds like we're being listened to, we're being heard, but again, we're just waiting to hear. There are some changes coming forward, but again, it's proofs in the pudding. So we hope to see some of that reflected in reality soon.
So tell me about the CFTA. This is and of course, again, as an old Canadian, Canadian Free Trade Agreement just sounds hilarious. I mean, I think the first time I voted was the North American Free Trade Agreement, and I thought that had lifted all restrictions on everything. But I guess we needed a CFTA as late as 2017. Tell me what changed there.
Look, like you said, there was definitely a focus on international trade, freeing up that, but it really required and necessitated the work to be kind of focused on at home here in Canada. So it's something that we would like to see kind of pushed a little further, in fact, because in theory, the Canadian Free Trade Agreement allows for now the free movement of people, goods, services, investment, which in theory sounds great, but in practice, which is the key, is that there are close to 130 pages of exceptions that provinces have placed on the Canadian Free Trade Agreement. So that's something so a province can say, hey, I don't want market access to someone outside of my province in a certain sector. So we see things like that across the board, which again, when we think of it, the fact that it's easier to, again, trade with neighboring states than provinces, that's a big concern when we think of Canada. And, other trade agreements, internationally, when they look at Canada, they see the reality that we're facing. It makes them kind of hesitate and question, is this something to move forward with? We've talked with organizations from European countries, frankly, that have cited this issue and want to learn more. So again, it's something that we want to see pushed further. Again, in theory, it's a great agreement, but we want to see provinces drop their exceptions, limit the barriers that they're putting up. And we've seen people or professionals, again, economists, professors say that there's close to $200 billion in lost productivity because of these barriers and exceptions to the CFTA. So we want to see that 200 billion tapped into again when we're facing a productivity crisis. And a lot of that comes to the fact that we need provinces to really hold the CFTA to the word, to the letter, and not add to these barriers that are being put up.
A billion here, a billion there. It adds up to real money eventually, Duncan. I think the thing we want to reflect on here is that we wouldn't want PEI coming in and dominating Nova Scotia's beer industry. That's I'm joking, of course. But this is the sort of rationale that underpins a lot of this stuff. I suppose it's probably more serious in some areas than craft beer, but it's the interprovincial protectionism just seems like a bizarre concept in this country to me. Okay, so let's get to the news of the day. I guess it's described as a pilot project. It's something I guess they're trying along the line in this harmonization spirit. Duncan, just walk us through what the latest I guess tweak is to the CFTA and the pilot project that they're trying.
Yeah, so a few weeks ago, there was a meeting in Charlottetown of provinces, territories, and the federal government to see how they can, improve interprovincial trade. And one of the results that came out of that was a pilot project where provinces, the majority of provinces, apart from New Brunswick and British Columbia and Quebec, New Brunswick and British Columbia didn't agree because they're in an election right now. But these provinces agreed to mutually recognize regulations affecting the trucking industry. And something as an organization we've been fighting for is mutual recognition, making sure that what's good enough in Ontario is good enough for Quebec, what's good enough in Quebec, good enough for Nova Scotia, all across the board. So this is kind of the first step to that overall goal that we're trying to push for in other organizations as well. So it's a good first step, and we're really happy to see an announcement. We're waiting to see the nitty gritty, the details of this pilot project, but it'll hopefully allow some of the issues that I highlighted previously. Again, that the difference in definition of sunrise and sunset, that's something that's going to be addressed. There's going to be other issues like that, so they sound a little ridiculous, but it's good to get them ironed out and really ensure that if you're a trucking, not just a trucking business, but if you're a business that relies on trucking, like your listeners and viewers who rely on trucking to get their products, I'm making sure that's as smooth as possible. Because again, if you just talk to anyone on the street and say, hey, did you know that if you're driving a truck, an oversized truck between BC and Alberta, the definition of sunrise might not be the same. Like, people would just shake their heads and say, what are you talking about? So again, it's good to see this being brought forward. It's something we've called for, but again, we want to see it expanded, not just to the trucking industry, but the industries across Canada. So we'll hopefully see some good results here. We've seen some other pilot projects on other barriers like food being tried across Canada. So again, there's pilots going forward. We hope to see some good results, and again, that expanded across all sectors across Canada.
Sorry, you got to go deeper for me on the sunrise sunset thing. What are the differences, and how are they possibly coming up with different definitions for this?
Yeah, it's just that it's the hour of the day, I guess. So when we look at other provinces, particularly in the western provinces, and again, if you're an oversized vehicle, so if you have your load on an oversized vehicle, if you go, let's say, this isn't specifics, but let's say that the difference is 5 and 6 a.m. If you're crossing that border between 5 and 6, again, it could be illegal, which is definitely a concern. And that's just one of the ridiculous things that we're hearing about, or not ridiculous, I should say, but odd realities that the trucking industry face and are trying to be addressed through this pilot project. And we hope to see it go forward and be expanded, and hopefully nothing bad comes of it. I'm sure it's only going to be good. Of course, safety is being kept in mind, and that's, of course, the utmost paramount thing that we're focused on too. But making sure that duplicative, redundant, odd kind of requirements that are being placed on the trucking industry are being reduced through this pilot project, and hopefully some good results coming.
Yeah, I would think the safety aspect is an area where there's possibly a lot of differences. One province will have a requirement and another one won't. Yeah, I mean, so I guess actually that's maybe interesting. If there's supposed to be mutual recognition, but one province doesn't really cover something and another province does, who wins? Do you refer to the province that you started in, or do you refer to the province where you're going?
It's definitely something we flagged, and we're hopefully see that in the results of the pilot project. Again, right now it's an announcement. We're hoping to see some in-depth and kind of, again, the nitty-gritty of the pilot project. But it's important to point out, we as an organization, we cite, the impact of red tape, but there's a difference between red tape and regulation. So when we think of red tape, again, like the sunrise and sunset differences, these are things that are, again, they're duplicative, they're unnecessary, they add restrictive burden to something that really shouldn't be there. And then there's regulations, right? There's ensuring that we're a safe environment, a safe economy, which again is something we've advocated for. We often say, we're not asking for people to go into construction, projects without hard hats. That's something that needs to be there. That's health and safety that's necessary. But we want to look at again those overburdensome and unnecessary regulations that are being placed on small businesses and all Canadians as well.
Yeah, do you need to mandate the color of the hard hat? This sort of thing. Exactly. Um, okay, great. So what other flags are going to remain in place after this pilot project, Duncan? What are you guys hoping will happen, I guess, going forward to make it even easier and for everybody to ship and move around?
Yeah, we hope to see some good things. We hope that it's easier, more efficient to move products between provinces. We're hoping that it adds to the productivity, which is badly needed. Hopefully, some added finances there that provinces, that small businesses, that the Canada in general are needing right now. But also, we want to hopefully see that it becomes more of a political priority. That we see this pilot as a success. We see provinces see, hey, maybe we can expand this to other sectors. There were some premiers previously, so Jason Kenney, Stephen McNeil in my neck of the woods. These were premiers that we could point to and say, hey, they see internal trade as a priority to reduce barriers. We don't see that right now, frankly. So we hope that this is a shining example of how reducing internal trade barriers can really benefit the economy as a whole, small businesses, large businesses, people that are listening on right now, making sure that this is a good example of what is hopefully to come. And we really want to see that expanded. And we want to see it as a way to show that there shouldn't be, old-fashioned protectionism between provinces, right? We don't need, effectively, small-scale trade wars being waged against other provinces. We want to see, of course, this is an example that we mutually agree to recognize either each province's regulations. No bad came of it. Let's see where else we can expand. Expand it to food. Expand it to, the trade of alcohol. Expand it to WCB coverage. To OHS regulations. So hopefully this is the first step in a long line of steps to hopefully get towards mutual recognition across our whole economy.
Yeah, I remember a particular episode here in Ontario during COVID. They were having trouble getting workers. I believe the concern was in Sarnia at the refinery, and our labor minister at the time, Monty McNaughton, great guy actually, said they just entered into an agreement with Newfoundland to recognize their like pipe fitting apprentice standards or something like that. And it's real simple. And it's like, well, geez, you're a pipe fitter in Newfoundland. Why wouldn't you be a pipe fitter in Ontario? It's crazy, But this barrier had been in place. And and it's that kind of thing, right? I mean, that it just you wonder where it came from in the first place sometimes.
It goes even more granular than that. For the longest time, provinces were fighting over what should be in a first aid kit, right? They're saying, hey, no, we think these size Band-Aids, we don't think the smaller one. Like these kind of little things just add up, and it just seems like, hey, we need to have some common sense here. We need to try and streamline these processes and making sure that, again, if you're a pipe fitter in Newfoundland, you should be able to work anywhere in Canada. What's the difference between these pipes, right? I think it's
the
again,
welding is the welding, the pipe is the pipe. I mean, if you're not blowing yourself up in Newfoundland, you're not blowing yourself up in Ontario. I mean, it's crazy stuff. I think the other thing that what are some good, and I hope I'm not putting on the spot here, Duncan, but what are some good information sources? I guess on that trucking and transportation side, if you well, I mean, I know the CFIB makes some great bulletins for this kind of thing, and I don't know if there's any plan to have something like that or if it's already out there. But if you were going from province to province with a load, Maybe this isn't something you've done before. Maybe you're expanding. Maybe you're a window manufacturer in Quebec and you're getting orders in Ontario for the first time, and you're going to have to look at how to get over there. What's a good information source that you can think of, Duncan, for people to know more?
Absolutely. Well, first, when we look at the Canadian Federation of Independent Business as well, we have a part of our organization called Business Resources, which is just the thing you're pointing to, right? If you have a question about your business, about interprovincial trade, about just basically anything that has to do with running a business, HR, things like that, you can give us a call, and they can really help you with that. So of course that's definitely something I would direct your listeners to. But also, organizations like the Canadian Trucking Agency, there's some great information out there. But when we think about data and information on interprovincial trade in general, this is something we've been really calling for on all levels of government. It's something we've been fighting for to make sure that we can see and identify, what sectors, what issues are being brought up. And thanks to the advocacy of CFIB and others, the federal government has launched a data hub on interprovincial trade. So anyone can go on, look at that hard data and see where are these issues. So if you're a trucker, or if you're doing window maintenance or anything like that, you can say, hey, is it easy for me to work in other provinces? Where are there really the friction points being felt there? Also on that trade hub, there is a list of reports and information pieces from, I believe the Canadian Trucking Agency is there, but also CFIB and all others. Really, there's some really great sources I definitely direct if you're just interested in this kind of odd situation, or if you're interested in trade in general, definitely check that out. I think it's a great source, and it's only going to grow from here. So those are some aspects. And again, of course, we always have our lines open at CFIB if you have any questions as well, 100%.
Fantastic. Well, you certainly wouldn't want your truck going across the border with the wrong kind of first aid kit in it, because who knows? Of course, that's something that's probably never going to get enforced. But I mean, this is the sort of thing, right? Listen, Duncan, this has been a wealth of information. Great efforts by the CFIB. I guess thanks from everybody for running this sort of thing down. We need to. These days we need to clear as much of the underbrush out of the way when we're trying to get to market, because it's challenging times. We need those rates to go down, interest rates, I mean. But that's a topic for another day. Duncan Robertson, Senior Policy Analyst for Nova Scotia, Canadian Federation of Independent Business. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks for covering the issue. Love having it brought up, and it really shines a light on some issues that really need to be addressed.
Thanks for listening to GlassTalk. You can find this episode at glasscanadamag.com or on the major podcasting services. GlassTalk is a presentation of Glass Canada Magazine and Annex Business Media.